Hello, and welcome back to the Ninox Learning Series. My name is Andy. I'm a Ninox programmer and trainer, and in this class, we're going to begin exploring an entirely new aspect of the Ninox relational database environment. In this class, the beginning of our 400-level training series, we're going to begin exploring coding, formulas, and writing code that allows us to automate processes and direct Ninox to perform automatically the things that we need it to do. Now, it doesn't matter if you're an experienced computer programmer or if this is your first time working with a computer application. If you've ever sent an email or posted something on social media, you have the skills necessary to do programming and development in Ninox. The most important thing is that you want to learn how to do it. And as long as you want to learn, I promise we can teach you. So let's go ahead and get started. Now, before we actually dive in and start writing lines of code, let's understand where code exists within the Ninox ecosystem, within the world that is the Ninox relational database environment. As we know from our previous training classes, there are essentially 4 levels within the collective construct that we call a database. At the highest level, we have the database or the application. The next level below that are the tables. Within tables, we have elements, fields, formulas, screen elements, and then within each of those elements, we have additional content. Let's look at this inside of the Ninox system so we can begin to understand this critical concept of code levels. Now, as we normally do, we're going to start off with a blank, empty database. And let's first begin by going into administrative mode and clicking on the Options tab at the desktop level. We see at the bottom of the screen these 2 fields, Global Script Definitions and the trigger after open. This is global or database level code. This is code that exists at the macro, the highest level of the database construct. Now, if we go down 1 level from the database, we get to the table level. When we build our tables, and this is a screen you should be well familiar with by now, the table management window, this is where we've been building our data model or our architectural structure. But if you look on the left-hand panel, you see 4 fields that we really haven't worked with before. Trigger on create, trigger after update, readable if, and writable if. These are the 4 opportunities we have to create table level code or table level programs. Now, within each table, we have the data model. In this center panel, we can create fields, for instance, text and numbers and choices. We can add in layout elements like headings and free text and buttons. And each of these elements, each of these components of a table can have their own level of code. By clicking on any one of these components, and for example, here is the text field, we see these 3 fields, display field only if, trigger after update, and writable if. These 3 fields allow us to create code and automate and direct processes at the field or table element level. And then finally, once we've created the table, we can go into a table, we can enter content into a text field, for instance, text content goes here, and we now can create code that is activated by or operates on the explicit and specific content of a single field. Now, going from top to bottom, we have database or application level code, beneath that table level code, beneath that field or table object or element level code, and beneath that at the lowest, most granular or micro level, content-based code. Let's start with some very basic concepts and constructs in coding. Let's go into our table. In fact, for those of you that are following along, let's create a new table. And let's call this table Name Math. And I want you to create 3 fields in the table, all text fields. And those text fields are to be called in order: first name, last name, and middle name. Now let's go get some content into those fields. And this is where you can go in, and we're going to go to our name math table and just create 3 or 4 records. Let's have, I don't know, Enzo Ferrari, Ferruccio Lamborghini, and finally, Ettore Bugatti. And if you want to add Messrs. Rolls and Royce, or whatever car manufacturer, or maybe your best friends, it doesn't matter. Create 3 individuals, each with a first and a last name, and go ahead and put them into the name math table. Once you've done that, return to the table edit or table management window. And I now want you to drag a new component into the table, and that is the formula. The first formula is going to be named full name FNL, first name last, and click OK. The second formula is going to be called full name FNF, first name first, and again click OK. When we go into a database of names, and this could be customers or vendors or tenants or students or employees, names are created by adding multiple segments together. And in this case, we have 3 records, 3 individuals, each with a name, each name consisting of 2 segments, a first segment and a last segment, a first name and a last name. What we want is to create a new field for Ninox to automatically calculate, if you will, the full name. There are instances where we want to act on a first name and a last name as separate pieces of content, but there are many instances where we want them combined together, and we simply call that the individual's name. Go into the field, again, make sure you're in administrative mode, go into the formula field called full name FNL, full name first name last. Select the field, click on the wrench, and click on the field that says formula. This is the second field, the field in the second line right below the field name. Click on that and you will open up the formula editor. This is our blank sheet of paper. This is where we create all code. It doesn't matter if it's application database level code at the very highest level, or field or element or content code at the very lowest level. All code in Ninox is created in this, the code editor. There are 2 versions of the editor. There is the graphic drag and drop version, and there is the text entry, or what we will call the manual version. In this video, this introduction to programming, we're going to spend some time in the visual code editor and slowly transition over to the manual text editor. In all of the remaining videos of this 400 level training series, we will deal exclusively with the text editor. For now, identify the flip switch at the very top of your screen in the code editor and make sure that the word visual is glowing in blue. You should see in the bottom left-hand corner the name of your table, name math, and all of the elements that exist within that table. And there are the 6 elements we created, first name, last name, middle name, text fields, and the 3 formulas, full name, first name, last, full name, first, and this 3rd formula field, which we're going to use later, and then the 7th field that was created by Ninox, the unique ID, the unique identifier that differentiates this record in this table from every other record in every other table in our entire Ninox universe. Now, what we want to do with this formula, the instruction that we're giving Ninox is take the last name and the first name and combine them together with a comma and a space between them, and we will call that the first name field, specifically first name with the first name last. This is going to be an excellent field for us to use when we want to sort listings of individuals alphabetically by last name, but instead of having 2 fields for the name, we can have everything in 1 field. I'm very slowly going to show you how to do this. I would like you to watch, and then I'm going to ask you to hit pause and go ahead and do it yourself. What we are going to do technically is called concatenation, the joining or combining of elements of content or elements of data. But what I like to call it is text math. We are going to add 2 pieces of text together. Now, as we know from mathematics, when we add 2 numbers together, we get 1 number that is the additive total of the separate components. Same thing when we're doing text math or adding text together. We're going to take 2 words, combine them together to get 1 new word. Again, watch as I do this very slowly. This is the first name last field, which, if you turn it around, is obviously last name first. I'm going to grab the last name field, click and hold with my mouse, and drag it into the edit area. Now, look at this line right above the blue box that says name math. And you see 4 different options. My field options, my calculate options, logic options, and finally text or date options. These 4 options, or think of them as buckets or containers. Each of these 4 containers is filled with 4 different types of things I can use to build formulas. We have one bucket that contains the fields, the components or elements that make up the table. A second bucket contains all the mathematic and statistical tools that we can use to manipulate content. The logic bucket, the third bucket, contains a collection of tools that we can use to make decisions. And the fourth and final bucket, the text date bucket, is a collection of tools that allow us to manipulate dates and time. The calculate bucket allows us to manipulate letters and numbers. The text date bucket allows us to manipulate or transform dates and times. Let us continue with building our formula. We were in the fields bucket, the fields section, and I had collected the last name field and dragged it up to be the first piece of my formula. I now want to add something to it. Adding is a form of mathematic calculation, and our calculation tools are in this second bucket. And the very first option is that plus sign, the add function. As I did with the last name, I grab it with a click and a hold of my mouse, I drag it into the formula editor, and I drop it right there. How many times have you heard me say it? If you know what to do, Ninox knows how to do it. I want to build a formula that adds three things together. Ninox is building the formula for me as I drag and drop these components into place. Now, we have our first component, the last name. We have the operation we wish to execute, the plus, the add. Now we need to drop in that second component, the text string. Let us go to the text date field and grab this text box, the first option, and by grab I mean click and hold, drag and drop, and now double click where we used to see the word text and type the following, comma, space, and click anywhere outside of that box. We now want to add the third and final element. How do we add an element? We go back to our calculating tools, we grab the plus or the add tool, drag it into position, and what is that third and final component? It's the first name. And where do we find the first name? It is in the bucket of fields, the container of fields that make up the architecture of this name math table. And there it is, first name. Grab it, drag it, and drop it. That's all there is to it. Click OK, and OK once again. And finally, save changes by clicking on the Save Changes button that appears in red in the top right-hand corner of your screen, and there we have it. First name Enzo, last name Ferrari has been transformed into a single piece of content that is Ferrari, comma, space Enzo. First name last. Now let's go back by clicking on the X to close the screen, and let's add a field to our view. Click with your mouse on the column heading, middle name, and then click on the Show Column button and select full name FNL, full name, first name, last. Click on it to add it to our view. Now, grab it. Click and drag on the column heading, full name FNL. Click and hold and drag it over 1, 2, 3 positions and drop it there. The last step is to alphabetize this field. Click on full name FNL. Click on the field heading of the second column and click on the word ascending. That's all there is to it. We now have an alphabetical list of all of the automotive manufacturers in our database sorted alphabetically by last name. I can go to the first name field and get rid of it, the last name field and get rid of that. I'll even hide the first name field, and while we're at it, let's get rid of ID. We now have an alphabetized list of the full name of every individual in our database, alphabetized by last name. This is aesthetically pleasing, and as we begin to need to use full names in other parts of our database, now instead of grabbing two fields and placing them on the screen, we can grab just this one field. At this point, if you'd like to practice this, hit pause. I'll wait while you practice. Go ahead and give it a try. Welcome back. I don't know if you went off and practiced or not, but I'm glad you're here. Let's continue. Now, we have the one field that is the calculated field, full name, first name, last. There are going to be instances where we are going to want to use the full name, but with the first name first. Let's calculate this. Let's program this formula manually using our text editor. But first, let's see an example of the code. Go back while in administrative mode and select full name FNL, click on the wrench, click on the formula, which should bring you back to the visual text editor, the visual formula editor, and this time click on text. Right in the middle of the top, where blue is indicating visual, click on the word text. Let's look at the actual line of code that Ninox created as a result of the drag and drop operation we just completed. A field name called last name is added to a string of text that consists of a comma and a blank space. That is added to another field called first name. And all of that collectively shows up in this field, full name, first name, last. Let's take a deeper dive into that block of code and check out a couple of things. You should now be in the text editor if you're following along, and you should be looking at this simple concatenation formula. Two very, very important things to learn here. First, fields or tables, or for that matter, any element that is a component of a table that has a space in its name must be enclosed in single quotation marks. Second, any text, any hard-coded text string that we use in a formula must be enclosed in double quotation marks. Now let me show you an option that sometimes can be confusing, but if you learn it early, it'll make perfect sense. I'm going to go back into the first name field, and I'm going to rename this field capital F, capital N, A-M-E, F name. And the last name I will rename capital L, capital N, A-M-E for last name. I will save those changes, return to the full name FNL field, and return to the formula. And look what Ninox has done. It has automatically changed the names of the fields within the formula, and it has removed the single quotation marks that were there previously. When you have a name of an element, whether it is a field, an object, or a table name, if there are no spaces in the name, if the name is one word or one contiguous text string, you do not need to enclose it in any kind of quotation. Text strings, hard-coded text strings like comma and space, must always be enclosed in double quotes. And by the way, they'll always appear, as you see here, in red. Everything else that is not a hard-coded text string will appear in black. And if it is a name or a reference to an object that has no spaces in its name, it does not need to be enclosed in single quotes. Now, let's build that second formula, and let's do it this time using the text editor, the manual code editor. Let's go in and select the full name FNF, first name first, and click on the wrench to bring up the parameters, and click on formula, where we are now going to tell Ninox what this calculation is to be. Take your mouse, point to the field that is the text field first name, and click. And there we see it right in the text editor. Use your keyboard to insert the plus sign by either using the numeric keypad or the shift key and the equal button that is just to the left of the delete key on the upper right hand side of your keyboard. Go ahead and put in the plus sign. But what do we know about hard-coded text strings that we use in our formulas, in our lines of code? They must be enclosed in double quotation marks. So we have double quotation, space, double quotation. We have enclosed a blank space and designated it as a hard-coded piece of text to be added to the contents of the first name field. One more field to go. So let's add another plus sign and point to the last name field in the left, point to it, click on it, and there we go. We have built a line of code, this time still with kind of a dragging and pointing and clicking mechanism, but now we're operating directly in our code editor. Click OK, OK again, save our changes, and there it is. Two fields that are calculating two different versions of a full name based on the individual components of the name itself. While remaining in administrative mode, click on the X that appears next to the table name, Name Math, to close the record, and click on the blank line just below Lamborghini, Ferruccio, and we're going to add a few more individuals from our world of classic and exotic cars. The first name of the next individual that we're going to create is Charles. His last name is Rolls, and this time we have a middle name, Stewart. Go ahead and click the plus sign in the top right-hand side of your screen to add his famed partner, and his name, of course, is Royce of the famed Rolls-Royce. His first name is Frederick. His last name, of course, is Royce, and his middle name, the name that he actually was called by, Henry. Sir Henry Rolls and Sir Charles Royce of the famed British car company Rolls-Royce. Let's continue. Now, first note that while those two records were added to our table as we expected, automatically their full names were calculated. Let's select Rolls, space Charles, and we can see that he is being referred to as Charles Rolls or Rolls, Charles, first name last. So once we've created that formula, remember I told you, once you create a piece of code, once you write code, it can be used to affect everything in the database or something as small as this particular record. In this case, we wrote field level code. We wrote a formula for this formula field and this formula field, but we placed it at a level where it affects every record in the database. Now, let's make some edits to our formula, starting with full name FNF. Select that field, go in to the parameter screen by clicking on the wrench, and return to the formula editor, the text formula editor, where we see this concatenation formula, first name plus space plus last name. Take your cursor and position it just to the right of the first plus sign. Click and release. You will notice, or maybe you didn't notice, and I'm going to point it out right now, in the bottom right-hand corner of the text formula editor in Ninox are two numbers separated with a slash. The first number tells us what line our cursor is positioned in. The second number, the number to the right of the slash, tells us the column in that line where our cursor is positioned. Just keep in mind that that indicator is down there, and in a few moments we're going to see why it is so important. Returning back to the cursor, which should now be blinking just immediately to the right of the plus sign, type the following: open quotation, space, close quotation, another plus sign, and select the middle name. Point to the middle name field with your cursor, click and release, and we have now inserted the middle name after a newly created space and between the first and the last. It's a middle name, probably makes sense to put it right in the middle. But notice there is a problem, there is an error. The error messages, if there is ever one, if there are ever problems with your code, with your syntax, the characters and the order of the characters that you have used to write a computer program, if there is a problem, that problem will be spelled out in red letters right up here, just below the cancel button, at the top left-hand section of your screen, the diametric opposite position of the cursor position indicator in the bottom right-hand corner. Now, these two things are as far apart from each other as they can possibly be, but they work together to provide a very important and valuable function. This line of code, end expected at line 1, column 35, is telling us there is a mistake, there is a problem. And that problem is in the first line of code at the 35th horizontal position as we count from left to right. The indicator down here in the bottom right tells us where we can find that position. I'm going to pop my cursor in, and I dropped it between the N and the A in the field first name. Now, let's tap our right pointing arrow on our keyboard to advance our cursor, paying attention to the indicator in the bottom right-hand column, and keep on clicking until it says 1/35. We are now at the position of the mistake. We are at the position of line 1 in the 35th horizontal space, counting from left to right. What is the problem? What's missing? An ending of some sort was expected at this position. What is missing is we have indicated two operands, a field called middle name and a blank space, but we have indicated no operator. We've indicated what we want to manipulate, but we have not indicated how we want the manipulation to take place. Position your cursor to the immediate left of the quotation opening the space set between middle name and last name. If you're looking at the indicator, the position indicator in the bottom right-hand corner, your cursor should be flashing in line 1 at position number 32. Go ahead and add a plus sign. Noting in the top left-hand corner that the error is now gone, and we now have not only a complete formula, but a correctly written formula. Click OK, not once, but twice, and then finally save our changes, and there it is. Our full name with the first name first, the full name FNF field, now reads Charles Stewart Rolls. Let's close this record. Click on full name FNL to bring up our view editor options. Select show column and select and click on full name FNF. So we now see from left to right our full name calculated formula with the first name last, followed by the full name with the calculated field first name first. Now remember I told you that when you are writing code, Ninox will do exactly, explicitly, what you tell it to do. Let me show you an example where that may not be what you want. Let us select the record for Enzo Ferrari, which is the second record in our listing. Let's select the full name FNL field, click on the wrench, and enter the text formula editor. Let us add an additional set of content to this formula, to this calculation, which right now reads last name plus comma space plus first name. Add another plus sign, type open double paren, space, shift 9, open parenthesis. Now type close parenthesis to end that text string, another plus sign, point to and click on middle name, click on yet a third plus sign, open double paren, open double quotation, close parenthesis, close double quotation. What we have stated here, what we have told Ninox to do, is calculate a single string of text consisting of, in order, the last name, a comma and a space, the first name, a space and a left parenthesis, the middle name, and then finally the right parenthesis. OK once, OK twice, save our changes, and that looks ridiculous. Ninox has done exactly what we told it to do. It has calculated a text string consisting of the last name, a comma and a space, the first name, a space and a left parenthesis, the middle name, and the right parenthesis. The problem is there's no middle name. Now let's close this field. When we look at records 4 and 5, the records for Charles Stewart Rolls and Frederick Henry Royce, it looks great because there is a middle name. So we're seeing the last name followed by the first name with the middle name in parentheses. But where there is no middle name for the records 1, 2, and 3, Bugatti, Ferrari, and Lamborghini, it actually looks a little bit strange. We are going to write 3 lines of code that enable to Ninox to decide whether or not to do this or that, whether or not to include that final string of text, which is the middle name enclosed in parentheses, or whether or not to skip it. Again, I'm going to go very slowly. I want you to watch me do this the first time, and then I encourage you to hit pause, rewind it, watch it a second or third time if you like, and then do it yourself in your own Ninox system on your own computer. What we're going to do is create an additional block of code that tells Ninox to do this sometimes, but do that other times. And whether or not it does this or that will be based on a decision or an evaluation. Is there a middle name? Let us select the record third in line for Ferruccio Lamborghini. Select full name FNL, click on the wrench, back into the formula text editor. I'm going to position my cursor in position 0 of the first line. And I'm just going to hit my enter key a couple of times to create some new space where I can type some additional code. Now, what we want Ninox to do is calculate the full name with the first name last one way if there's a middle name, and a different way if there is not a middle name. Now let's type the instruction exactly as I wrote it. If, and I add the space, the middle name field is not equal to nothing, then. Okay, little weird. Let's stop and analyze. If this is a keyword in Ninox that tells Ninox we are about to instruct you on how to make a decision. If, and now we explain the condition that is to be evaluated. If this is not equal to that, then, and we're going to hold there. Let's keep in mind a couple of things. First, whenever you hear me refer to a keyword, it is lowercase. If the middle name is not equal to, then, and let's go ahead and grab this line of code. I'm going to cut it out of line 7 and place it in line 2. If there is a middle name, if the middle name is not empty, calculate the full name to be this formula right here. When creating this type of structure, this decision-making structure, which is called the if-then structure, the true process is always first, and the false process is always second. I'm now going to go to the second line and introduce my next keyword, else. If the middle name is null, which means this condition evaluates to a state of falseness, do something else. And the something else is this. Calculate the full name to simply be last name plus a space plus the first name. I will hit the return button to now go to line 5, and I will type the third, or actually the fourth and final keyword in this structure, end. This concludes the instructions you, Ninox, need to decide whether to do this or that. If there is a middle name, if the middle name is not blank, add it between parentheses to my full name calculation. If it is blank, which means don't do this, do the other thing is simply create or calculate a full name consisting of last name space first name. I will click OK once, twice, and save changes. And now let's go back, let's close this record, this form view, and let's look at that full name, first name, last field. Mr. Bugatti, Mr. Ferrari, and Mr. Lamborghini have no parentheses at the end of their name because we've indicated no middle name. Rolls and Royce do have the middle name because a middle name exists. If something is true, then do this, or else do that. When we last saw this formula, or specifically this text screen, it looked like that. Everything was left aligned, and there were a couple of blank lines after the last line of my code block. When I clicked OK, Ninox automatically formatted my code block. It indented the operations within the if-then structure, and it eliminated the blank and unnecessary lines at the very bottom of the code block. Why did it do this? This makes it easier for us to read our code. Pretty soon we're going to be building blocks of code that are dozens and quite frankly could be hundreds of lines long. By left justifying the keywords and indenting the operations, it makes it easier for us to see blocks of code. This is a block of code. It begins with an if, it ends with the end. And everything between those two keywords is part of this block, or what we call this structure, specifically this if-then structure. So again, the indentation will happen automatically. You don't need to do it manually. Blank lines that are unnecessary will be removed automatically. For example, if I double spaced every line in this formula, while it may make it easier to read, it also makes the formula bigger, which takes up more space, which we don't want. So as soon as I click OK, if I'm to go back and look at that formula, we'll format it automatically the way it needs to be. Click OK once and twice, and now exit administrative mode. Item number 1. When you are building code, start with the visual editor. Start by going in to the visual editor and dragging and dropping. Remember those 4 buckets of tools. Our field bucket, our calculation, or we now know this to be the operations bucket, the logic or decision-making bucket, and what's the first option? The if, then, else. Remember, that's going to be a structure we're going to come back to over and over again. And finally, the text date. What calculations do to letters and numbers, text date operations do to dates and times. Once you've dragged and dropped, switch from the visual editor to the text editor to see the syntactic result of what you dragged and dropped. We created it this way, but we can see it actually should be typed that way. The second thing to remember, any field, table, or object or element that has a space in its name, which means its name consists of at least 2 words, those elements must be enclosed in single quotes. Item 3 to remember, hard-coded text strings, like a comma or a space or a word or parentheses or anything else, must always be enclosed in double quotes. The next thing I want you to remember, if there is an error in your code, Ninox will tell us in the left top hand corner what the error is, and in the bottom right hand corner we can use that to find out where the error is. For example, getting rid of this plus sign, top left, there is an error in line 1, column 53. Where's my mouse? Line 1, column 41. 8 characters to the right. There I am at 53. What's wrong? There's a missing character, and that character is the plus sign. Correct the error. Error goes away. OK it again. And now Ninox is doing exactly what we have instructed it to do every single time. And it is deciding between whether to do it this way or that way because of that all-important if-then structure. That's it, folks. You're computer programmers now. Practice what you have learned. Create a table with multiple text fields and practice concatenating them or adding them together in different orders. Then do a little of number math. Create some numeric fields and add those together. If you really want to get exciting, go into the visual editor, do some division, do some multiplication, and constantly be aware of the syntax, the characters, and the order of those characters as presented in the text code editor, And by dragging and dropping and then looking at the text version, you will quickly learn how to speak the binomial language that is the Ninox coding language. Coding is fun. It is powerful. It is an amazing capability to instruct technology to do the work for us. You, having completed this session, are now a computer programmer. To become an expert, or at least a little better at it, check out the next videos in this 400 series. Keep practicing, and remember the most important rule of all. You can do it. Thanks for joining us. I'll see you in the next class. Bye-bye.